Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning, Rachel, and good morning to you all, and Happy New Year to everybody. I'm Councillor Eddie Strangle. I'm chairing the Pensions Committee on behalf of the County Council. And we just move now to the vote through a roll call. Rachel, if I could ask you to conduct that, please.
Thank you. Can I ask members to confirm that they are present when I read out their name? Councillor Strangle.
Present.
Councillor Coupland.
Present.
Councillor Adams. Councillor Boothroyd.
Present.
Councillor Key. Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
Present.
Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Andy Ancliffe.
Present.
Steve Larter.
Present.
Councillor Waller.
Present.
Thank you. We also have the following officers in attendance. However, officers are not required to confirm their presence. Andrew Crookham, Executive Director for Resources. Claire Mackey, Accounting, Governance and Investment Manager. Joe Ray, Head of Pensions. Michelle Brady, Assistant Director of Finance. And Peter James, Independent Advisor. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rachel. Just to reiterate that we are using the chat system, and I would advise all committee to open your chat box so that you can type speak in if you wish to speak. Thank you for that, Rachel. If we can have any apologies for absence, please.
Thank you. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Mrs. Rawlins.
Thank you, Rachel. Item 2, declarations of members' interests. If, of course, you've already indicated an interest on your DPI, then you do not need to do so. However, I'll invite people who wish to make a declaration, and should anyone have missed something and they may want to come in later, then please do so through the speak or through the chat box. I've got Andy Ancliffe first. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I declare an interest, please, as an employee of LCC and a contributing member to the fund? Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I've got an indication that Steve Larter wishes to say something. Steve?
Thank you, Chairman. If I can declare an interest as a deferred and active member.
Thank you for that, Steve. Any other declarations? None given at the moment. If we can move then to the minutes of the...
Sorry, Chairman, I think Councillor Waller has raised his hand.
Well, I don't want hands raised. That's the problem. I can't see them. So can you type speak in the chat box, please, Rob? But anyway, yeah. Carry on.
I certainly did. I typed something in, but it wasn't acknowledged, which is why I raised my hand. But I will try again if I need to. I just want to declare an interest as the start of the new year in the fact that my daughter is a senior manager in the Children's Services Department of Lincolnshire County Council and is a paying member to the fund. Thank you. Thanks
for that. Okay, that's noted, Rachel. So we'll move on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of December. There are only 2 pages on this. So if I can take for accuracy page 1 and again for page 2. And if there are any items that you wish to speak on the minutes, I think I've got Steve Larter again. Steve?
Thank you, Chairman. Minute 108, it says that I'm an inactive member. Hopefully I'm an active member, if that could be changed, please.
Yeah. Rachel, can you please note that?
Yeah.
That's fine. I need a proposer first for to accept the minutes as they are written. Could I have a proposer, please?
Chairman,
I will propose that. It's Mike Thompson. My video camera is not working, but the audio is okay. Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Proposed by Councillor Mike Thompson. Can I have a seconder, please?
Hi, Chairman. It's Richard Buttroyd. I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Richard. Rachel, if we could go through vote on that through the roll call, please.
Yes, Chairman. If when I call members' name, if they could state whether they for, against, or abstain. Thank you. Councillor Stringill.
For.
Councillor Coupland.
For.
Councillor Boutroyd.
For.
Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
For.
And Councillor Thompson.
For.
Andy Ancliffe.
For.
Steve Larter.
For.
And Councillor Waller.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Rachel. If we can then move to item 4, please, to the Independent Advisors Report. If I can invite Peter Jones. Peter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. After the events of last night, I hope what I've got to say doesn't appear entirely mundane. What I did want to say was my paper was written 3 weeks ago because of the timescales that Claire and Joe have. And quite a lot has changed since then. Not least is the new mutation or mutations, because I think there are several, of the coronavirus. And that's obviously, as you know, already provoked new lockdowns in the UK and Europe, and no doubt will in the USA in due course. I'm assuming Joe Biden will now assume presidency after the events of last night. But also important is the result in Georgia, which I assume everybody's familiar with. The Democrats won both seats to the House, to the Senate, and that means that Congress is not gridlocked as some feared. There's been a Brexit solution. I don't think that's of global significance, but it certainly helps the UK market, which, as you may have seen, actually rose 3% yesterday. Let me talk briefly about the global economy. I just wanted to give you some numbers in round figures. These are obviously not accurate figures. The global economy will probably have been down about 5% in 2020. Until the events of the mutation, most commentators were thinking it would rise by 5% in 2021, particularly helped by China. And in fact, all of the economies of East Asia, which seem to have come through the coronavirus very well and are growing quite strongly again. The exception to those general figures, unfortunately, is the UK, which is likely to have been down at least 10%. There were forecasts of a rise in the current year of maybe 5%. I don't know what it'll be now with lockdown, but I think what is clear is that any recovery is going to be very much back-end loaded. The significance of the figures I've been talking about is that the market is still very confident that there will be a significant improvement in profits and dividends. And I think that still is the case. So despite the calamitous fall in markets that you saw last March, investments in 2020 had a very good year. I do commend to everybody the monthly newsletter that Joe and Claire write, because at the back there is a table and a graph showing the performance figures. Most equity markets around the world grew over 10% last year. Sterling, of course, was the exception, which was down something like 10%, although it had a good rebound on the Brexit news. The Lincolnshire portfolio last year only grew about 3%, which on the face of it's disappointing. But as you're well aware, we've had difficulties as a fund with the Invesco performance, with the BCPP Global Fund, and also with Morgan Stanley. And there will be a fuller report from Joe at the March meeting, but not a good year. So to summarise, Chairman, most markets have had a very good increase in 2020. One or two look decidedly frothy, but we're back with the conundrum that because of the new lockdowns, because of the mutations, the fundamentals in the short term are deteriorating. And an application of what I call conventional wisdom would suggest that markets would react downwards. But counterintuitively, they're reacting upwards. And that's because of the belief of markets that the central banks, and indeed governments themselves, will come to the aid of deteriorating economies. So, in short, it's more of the same. And I think the danger to markets is not that things get worse, but perversely that they actually might get better, and perhaps in the second half of the year. To summarise, Chairman, at the moment investors are tiptoeing on eggshells, and I think that's going to continue for some weeks, if not months. I'll leave it there, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Do any of the committee wish to ask Peter a question on his report? If so, please type speak in the chat box. None forthcoming. Thank you very much, Peter, for your report. Moving on then to item 5, report by the independent chair of the Lincolnshire Local Pension Board. Over to Roger. Roger, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be fairly brief. Just to say that the purpose of this report is to update the Pensions Committee on the work of the Pensions Board during the last few months, receive assurances gained from the board's work, and also consider any recommendations. I'll assume that the report has been read, but I'd like you just to move to page 12, right down at the bottom, with the assurances gained. So we looked at the IDRP procedure and we were content with that. Although we've received an unqualified report on the pension fund accounts, it's fair to say that the pension board, and no doubt Andrew Crookham is very disappointed that Mazars are late in signing their certificate. From a email exchange I had with Claire, that doesn't look as though it will happen until the end of February, which has got to be a concern. But I mean, in my terms, it was an unqualified report, and they will sign it off in due course. Third one, Chairman, we were very pleased with the assurances that the County Council's internal audit team gave in relation to audit work which had been undertaken by the West Yorkshire, or been undertaken by the West Yorkshire team. And they'd covered annual benefit statements, accuracy of recorded contributions, transfers in, and normal and early retirements. There were some recommendations on the accuracy of recorded contributions, but those have been taken on board and implemented. The majority of employers are paying their contributions on time. We still have concerns about the data scores, Chairman, and we cannot give you a full assurance on this aspect. We've got a further report this afternoon. I think there has been some improvement, over the last 6 months, but there's still some concern there. And then finally, Chairman, we gained some assurance on the issue of cyber security through the work of Bradford City Council. There were no recommendations, just those assurances, Chairman. Open to questions.
Thank you, Roger. Anyone like to ask a question? Roger's report. None showing in the chat box. Roger, obviously you're going to be dealing with this this afternoon with Eunice. Maybe it's a question I might ask Eunice when his report comes up. It's regarding this 2.5 under the concerns you have for the data scores.
Yes.
It is something that really we need to get cracking on with. So I would welcome at the next meeting we have that you give us an update on that, please. I'm sure you can't do that right now, but maybe you'll get further information this afternoon.
Of course, Chairman. I mean, there's certainly been an improvement since over the past 6 months, but it's still, the scheme specific is around about 86%, and it really ought to be higher than that. And certainly some of our fellow authorities are higher than that. Whether or not they're singing from the same hymn sheet, they should be. But as you say, we'll discuss it this afternoon with Eunice, and I will certainly report back in March.
Thank you, Roger. I've got the director, the executive director, Andrew Crookham. Andrew, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add on to what Roger said about the accounts issue. Yeah, naturally we are very disappointed that the council's accounts have been delayed in signing something that no Section 151 officer wants to see. Just to give you the update, just to add on what Roger said. So clearly the issue with the actual council accounts, not the pension fund accounts, was related to the valuation of the energy from waste plant down in North Hykeham. So we've adopted a evaluation process with that was agreed with the previous auditors that had been in place for the last 6 or 7 years since the plant's been in operation. The new auditors weren't happy with that valuation, so we've had to engage a independent valuer, and that's what leads to the delay into February, unfortunately. So they have to come and visit the site. There's a lot of complicated components of the plant, as you'd imagine, such that it is. And that's the process they have to go through. So, naturally, we're working with them to resolve the issue as soon as we can. But unfortunately, that has an impact on the pension accounts, which is, as Roger rightly said, a clean bill of health. So, apologies to the committee for that. As I say, it's something that we didn't want to happen naturally, but is unavoidable at the moment. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. There be no further questions. I propose that we accept the report by noting it only, and we'll do that and accept it if nobody wishes to actually type in that they have got another comment or disagree with the report. Give it a second or two. Thank you. So we accept that the report by the independent chair of the Lincolnshire Local Pension Board has been noted. Thank you. Moving on then to item 6, which is the pension fund update report. If I can ask Jo to come in, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the standard quarterly paper. I'm assuming it's been read, so I'd just like to highlight a few areas there. Section 1 on page 15 has been expanded to include the overall fund performance update that was previously included in the investment management report. The detail on individual manager performance is set out in the investment performance report at agenda item 12, which Claire will take you through later. The relative performance over the quarter to the end of September was positive, but did lag our benchmark at 0.5% against a benchmark return of 0.9%. Section 2 on page 18 details the stewardship activity undertaken over the quarter, and detailed proxy voting reports for the 2 border to coast managed equity funds are included at appendices D and E. It has been brought to my attention that actually those reports are quite difficult to read in the notes against the reasons why Border to Coast have voted against management, so I will be referring that to Border to Coast to see if that can be made more user-friendly for the next meeting. Section 5 on page 21 recommends that a new risk is added to the risk register, that being where changes in legislation are not implemented correctly. The risk score is assessed at being a 4 on this, with both the likelihood and the impact at 2. It's quite a difficult place to be at the moment in the LGPS word. There are a lot of changes that are currently being brought in legislation or are under consultation, which could cause difficulties for funds if they're implemented incorrectly. The key legislative risk at the moment is the implementation of the 95k cap, which is explained in more detail at section 7 on page 24. So I'll now move on to that section, just to provide a bit more detail about that. So as you've previously been made aware, new legislation was being brought in by Treasury to cap exit payments in the public sector to £95,000. These regulations came into force on the 4th of November 2020, and for the LGPS as a funded scheme, the pension strain payments are included within that cap. Whilst the 95k cap is mainly an issue for public sector employers, such as LCC, there is a knock-on impact for the fund. The current LGPS regulations require that if a scheme member is made redundant at age 55 or over, they're automatically given an unreduced pension. So that's one which isn't reduced by the actuary to take account of them getting it early. The cost of this to the fund is captured as a pension strain, and the employer is required to pay that directly to the fund when that person leaves. If this breaches the new cap, however, under the Treasury regulations, the pension should either be deferred or reduced. We can't pay an unreduced pension. Therefore, the two sets of regulations are currently at odds with each other. The consultation from MHCLG issued in September on reforming local government exit pay, including amendments to align them with the Treasury regulations, was extended to the 18th of December. So this delay means that the LGPS regulations will not be amended until sometime in early 2021. MHCLG Minister Luke Hall sent a letter to all administering authorities in October, setting out their view that the new exit pay regulations from Treasury effectively curtailed the LGPS regulations when the cap was breached. And the Scheme Advisory Board has also set out its view, following legal advice, on options for funds. The fund has taken its own legal advice as to what it should do in the period before the LGPS regulations are amended as to how it can protect itself, taking into consideration the Minister's letter and the Scheme Advisory Board advice. And the course of action we are taking is set out in paragraph 7.7 on page 25. All employers have been notified of this, and this is actually a similar action to that which most funds are taking. There are, however, a number of legal challenges underway about the introduction of the exit cap ahead of the changes to the LGPS regulations. And there's also no guarantee that any member impacted by this won't go to the Ombudsman to seek an unreduced pension, where the fund then may not be able to recover that strain cost from the employer. So at the moment, all LGPS funds and the Local Government Association are keeping a close eye on how this unfolds. So it is an area of uncertainty for us. Moving on, section 8 on page 25, this provides an update on the budget and business plan that was brought to the March Pensions Committee. Paragraph 8.3 explains the variances in the budget to the end of September 2020, with the biggest difference there being in manager fees, where most fees now are not actually collected until the year end, as pooled vehicle fees are collected through adjustments to the net asset value of the holdings rather than being invoiced. Therefore, this isn't actually a true reflection of fees at this point in the year, as we're only able to report on any fees that are invoiced to us until after the year end. An update on progress against the business plan is set out at paragraph 8.4. There are two areas there that are behind schedule. One being the delay in receiving the audit opinion, which Roger has already spoken about and Andrew has updated the committee on. The second area being participating in work of the Scheme Advisory Board. where progress on the good governance review has been delayed due to the pandemic. We're hoping that that will start again at some point this year. Both areas, though, are out of our control on that. The final comment to make is on the training and conferences at Section 8. Obviously, officers have not attended anything in person since the last meeting. Excuse me. However, there are many virtual webinars and discussion meetings being held, covering all the hot topics of COVID, McLeod, 95k cap, amongst other things. In December, the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum held its annual conference virtually, and the committee were all invited to attend that event. Topics there covered managing climate change in a pension fund portfolio, financial reporting on climate, the COVID crisis and how companies have treated workers, and also it went over the LAPFF annual report. More information about those topics can be found on the LAPFF website. The next training committee will be held on the 11th of February from 10 AM to 12 PM. And Rachel will be sending out meeting invitations later today. We'll be inviting our new actuary, Barnett Waddingham, to meet the committee and to explain their processes, as in some places they differ quite considerably to Hymans Robertson. But if there are any other training topics that the committee would like us to include at that meeting, then please either raise it now or let me know, and we can arrange that. And finally, the committee are asked to share any comments they've had on any training events that they've virtually attended. Otherwise, I will be happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Richard, before I bring Richard in, obviously this date for training is hot off the press, although you and I have discussed it earlier, Joe. So it is important to reiterate the date, 11th of February, 10 AM on this means. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just going back to 7.7 with regards to the cap. If a pension member was to take the reduced amount and then the legislation changed, would they be able to come back for the other, or is that once you've taken it, you've taken it? And the other thing is, if you do defer, is there a time limit on that?
If the legislation changed, we would go back and administration would recalculate those pensions, so the scheme member would always got what they were entitled to. If you choose to defer your pension, then you can take it at any point up to the age of 75, and that's the standard legislation at the moment. So that won't be changing. Okay, so
there's some reasonable options then for people to postpone or look at this at a later date if you are going to lose a substantial amount of money. Do we have many people at the moment that's hitting this?
I don't have those figures. I don't know if Eunice wants to come in a moment if he's seen anything. The issue is, I say, it is more an employer issue because they are the ones that are responsible for ensuring that any exit payments do not breach the cap. But it's not all of our employers that are covered under the Treasury regulations as well. So it's incredibly complex and really difficult for employers to understand, let alone for scheme members to try and get their heads around. So I don't see those pension strain calculations or the redundancy information coming through. So Eunice, I don't know if you've got any figures or any idea of volume yet.
Morning, everybody. We haven't got any figures as yet, Joe, but we've not come across many numbers, to be honest, across the whole fund. So it's not a big issue at the moment. Potentially, it may become an issue as we may get more early retirements. What we did, or what one of the big employers within our fund did, which was Leeds City Council, is because they had a big early retirement scheme just before Christmas, is they brought forward all the retirements that potentially might have been impacted. So we were able to kind of bypass the new rules before they were before they came into implementation, but subsequently we've not had many cases.
Great, thank you, Eunice. Thank you, Jay.
Sorry, you're on mute, Councillor Strengle.
Hi. Myself at last. I do apologise. I was trying because other people are coming off mute, and it's starting to create a bit of a feedback, and I could hardly hear what you were saying, Joe. So could I ask you please to go on mute unless you're about to speak? So anyway, Steve, you wanted to speak. Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering if Rachel could send out the committee meeting dates and training dates for this year, because I haven't got any of them in my calendar. So that'd be useful, please.
Yes, I can send those out again for you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Strengle, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I do apologise again. I'll just leave it off mute. I know it's so difficult that we try to do the best thing and then we get caught out by it. So my excuses are not valid, really. But, Andy has said that he attended the LAPFF conference and found it excellent, very varied and informative, wide range of diverse and interesting topics. Thank you for that, Andy. Mike Thompson's having audio problems, so he's going to rejoin us later on. So if I can come back to Joe's report, I've got a question and a comment. First of all, on page 23 at the top, we talked about termination of Invesco, which we all agreed on not so long ago. How are we progressing with this termination, Joe?
Thank you. Yes, we actually had a meeting with Legal and General yesterday to agree the transition plan and how we're going to do that. So there have been discussions with Invesco and Border to Coast and Legal in General. We're lucky that we're able to cross about £60 million with another Border to Coast fund that is looking to reduce their holdings in the Global Equity Alpha Fund. So that will save us some fees going in there. And in using Legal and General, we should hopefully be able to save in transition costs as they take in all the assets from Invesco and reorganise. So we're hoping to get some, we have another discussion with them next week to hopefully get some dates finalised, and we're hoping end of the month or towards the beginning of February, we'll be able to get that transition done.
Thank you, Joe. At the bottom of the page, this is directed to the committee, by the way. It does say that any questions or comments on the papers for the joint committee, which you all receive in advance, should be directed to me. I would ask you that it would be useful if any of the committee would like to raise a question that I can raise on behalf of Lincolnshire Pension Fund to the joint committee. So I'd ask you to have a perusal of the agenda when it comes to you, and if there's any topics that you wish me to raise with the committee, then I'd be glad. So that's all I want to say on that. So I can see that Mike Thompson has rejoined, so I'm fit for that. Mike, if we could go back to the recommendations, please. Not only are we asked to note the report, but we're also asked to vote on the addition to the risk register as detailed in section 5. So it will be for, against, or abstain, and I would ask Rachel to please do the call.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Strengill.
For.
Councillor Coupland.
For.
Councillor Boothroyd.
For.
Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Andy Ancliffe.
For.
Steve Larter.
For.
And Councillor Waller.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Rachel. if we can move then to agenda item 7, this is the Pensions Administration Update Report. Over to you, Eunice.
Thank you, Chairman. This is my quarterly report for the period up to end of September. I will go through it very briefly, assuming everybody's ready. So, in terms of KPIs, service level agreements, etc., it's been under the circumstances, it's been quite pleasing that work still continuing. Key performance targets are being met. Been met very well in most of the cases as well, and the number of cases that have been processed haven't suffered because of remote working and internet issues, etc. We've had very little issues with internet connectivity to the main Bradford Council hub, so quite pleasing that KPIs are still looking very good, and nothing much to report on there really, maybe other than just to say the one key one really is the transfer out quotes area, but that's because we are under more scrutiny in from the pensions regulator in terms of making sure that transfers are not kind of subject or come under the scams arena really, which seems to be more prevalent now with kind of remote working and with more potential now. There's certainly a lot more work we're doing, and I know that this is one of the biggest areas of concern for the pensions regulator at the moment, and we're obliged to make sure that the transfers proceed on the basis that the member is being made aware of all the implications of all the risks and the impact of any decisions they might be making. So that's certainly added to some of the timescale in terms of how we perform. Details of membership and age group for Lincolnshire Pension Fund is shown in the report, and we as usual, our surveys that we do with members still continuing, and again quite pleasing to report that the responses are still very positive that we get back from members. In terms of employer trading, certainly during the early part of lockdown, all employer training was suspended because there was no face-to-face training taking place, but that's now been superseded by webinars and online training. That's kind of been introduced by us. So we're looking to do as much as we can via webinars and online training, and the take-up on that seems to be quite positive. And I guess the advantage we have with online training is that we can have training across all the pension funds that we administer. It's not limited to one employer, one location, but kind of a different number of participants all on there. Really, the other bits I wanted to just mention is the Tpr Scheme Returns. We submitted the Pensions Regulator Scheme Return before the deadline of 15th of December. One of the kind of returns on the TPR is the data scores, which was mentioned previously, and I will just touch on that. As Chair of the Pensions Board alluded to earlier, the scheme-specific data score has improved from last time, and obviously there is still some work to do in terms of getting it to a higher state. But some of the issues regarding that, I would say, is probably more to do with programming and picking up the relevant fields from our records rather than actual issues with the data. And that's work that we have got planned. Unfortunately, it's just waiting for IT resources, IT time to be able to focus on that area and try and get to the bottom of improving the program so that we're looking at the right information and picking up the right information The issue we have with the system we use is that information can be held in different places. It's not fixed to one particular field, and depending on the type of membership, whether it's an active, deferred or pensioner, then it could be in different places on the record. So that's certainly work that we have to do, and rest assured that we will be focusing on that as soon as we can. It's not to say we don't have the information, it's just picking it up in terms of where it is held. We recently had our reaccreditation or recertification, should I say, for our quality standard ISO 9001. The report, the audit was very successful with no issues identified. I've recently had a copy of the report, and it's a very positive report. We've now been certified, reaccredited for the next 3 years, and that's pleasing, and should be again assurance to say to LPF to say that we have got very good processes in place, and we adhere to those processes, and we've got everything that we need to identify as issues, and where we do come across issues, then those are dealt with accordingly. Web registrations, just a breakdown of the number of web registrations. Reason I'm highlighting this is because we do have a plan in place now from later this year when we start issuing ABSs, that we will be moving to online issue of ABSs, and potentially making our member portal the normal form of communication with members, where they choose to use that function. So the percentages are roughly around 13-14% for take up at the moment. We will be hoping to increase that to a much higher percentage, and what our plan is that we'll write to members when their ABSs are ready to be viewed, and we'll let them know where their ABSs are and how they can register if they haven't already registered. But if they wish to still receive in paper format, then we will still provide that service as well. On the technical issues, really just two areas to highlight. One, Joe's already touched on in detail, so I won't say much on that, which is the 95k cap. That obviously is an issue for us, because as Joe highlighted, we're at odds with the pension regulations is at odds with Treasury regulations, and until we get a firm changes to the regulations, then potentially there may be issues that come back in terms of, again, highlighted previously about benefits that might have to be recalculated if things change again. And the other issue is the McLeod. That is a issue that's on the horizon, that's kicking off in terms of the work that might be required to identify any McLeod cases, and again the impact in terms of workloads and the calculations to benefits that might be required as a result of that. Lastly, really, the shared service budget. It's a breakdown of the budget in terms of what the cost per member is likely to be for 2021. Whilst we forecast a budget of £16.50, current forecasts look as though that budget might be around the £15.09 mark. So again, a potential saving of over 100,000 for LPF. So I will leave it at that. If anybody's got any questions.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Eunice. Joe, you wish to come in?
Thank you. Yes, it was just a question on the transfer out quote. I just wondered if there'd been consideration to actually changing the target days, because the extra work that's required to be done now to ensure that any transfers out are safe for the scheme member is not going to change. That's going to continue. So I just wondered if that was going to be extended, so that, because it's not really a failure because you're just having to put additional work in.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and that's a good point, because obviously it looks as though the KPI is failing when it's not. So that area will be looked at, potentially either with changing the number of days, or looking at how we can measure from a different point within the process itself. So there could be, if we've introduced extra stages in the process because of the TPR requirements, then we need to measure from that particular stage rather than from where we're measuring at the moment. So yes, that process is on the list to be looked at, and hopefully we'll resolve it before the next quarter.
Thank you, Eunice. Got Steve wishing to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to the age profile at table 2.4, obviously the numbers in the younger age groups are looking relatively low. Is that because there's fewer younger people employed in our organisations, or is it just that they're not taking up the pension scheme? Or do we not know?
We to be honest, we don't really know, because we only get details of people that have actually joined. Where people have opted out would be held at employer level. But I would say from experience it would be a combination of both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Eunice. No other questions that I can see showing on the chat box. So if we come back to the report, thank you for your report, Eunice. Committee are asked to note the report. Unless I see anything detrimental to that, we will accept that the report is noted. So thank you, Katie. And thank you, Eunice.
Thank you, Chairman.
Moving on to item 8, which is the employer monthly submissions update. Claire, you come in, please.
Good morning, everybody, Chairman. This is the standard quarterly update on late and inaccurate employer submissions, and the report today covers the second quarter of 2021. The number of late payments and data submissions are set out in the table at the top of page 80, and these are analysed between late payment of cash contributions, the late submission of data which support the cash payment, both late payment and cash, which is a very rare occurrence, and then where we've received cash and data on time, but they don't actually match each other. As you can see, there are generally very few employers who pay late cash contributions to us. The area of poorest performance remains the data being returned, and that's the detail of the contributions down to an individual member level. During the first quarter of the year, we had issues with a large payroll provider to academies having trouble submitting data returns, and then following intervention from the West Yorkshire Pension Fund representatives, we saw some improvement in that in quarter 2. However, moving forward into quarter 3, their performance has deteriorated again. Throughout this period, the finance technician at the fund has been in contact with the payroll provider and their associated employers. And to tackle this further, the fund has written to all those employers affected by these issues. And that is just to remind them of their responsibilities to submit accurate and timely data and payments to the fund. During the quarter under review here, we also saw a small number of late contributions in August associated with the submission date falling over the weekend, and a small number of changes to payroll providers for September returns. The individual detail of employers making those late returns is set out in Appendix A to the report. And then if we move to the bottom of page 80, you can see details of employers who have received fines during the quarter. Paragraph 1.7 explains the situation when a fine is issued, and that's where an employer makes a late submission 3 out of 6 months on a rolling basis. And as you can see, for quarter 2, there were 4 fines issued by the fund. I wouldn't propose to go into any more of the detail on the report, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire. I haven't got anybody indicating. I've got a bit of an echo there. Why? I haven't got anybody indicating. I just noticed that on 1.7, fines are currently set at a minimum of £136. I presume that's variable then. It could be higher and who decides that?
That is a fund decision, but it generally works on the basis that if somebody's late 3 out of 6 times, we would fine them at that £136 level. And then if they were late a 4th time, they would obviously incur a second fine. And then we would use our discretion as to whether that should be increased beyond that.
When you say your discretion, do you mean officer discretion?
Yes. So I suppose if you felt that there was an inherent underlying problem, then we would consider pushing the fines up from that point. If it felt that that additional occasion was a genuine error and not related to an underlying problem, then we would view it differently, maybe.
Right, committee, we've been asked, oh, hang on, we've got Joe wanting to come back. Joe?
Sorry, it was just for a bit of clarity. The level of fines are all set out with the administration within the administration strategy, so employers will be aware of how they're calculated, and it does also reflect the amount of time that is spent in trying to sort them out and the level of seniority of staff that have to get involved. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to the employers when they do get fined. It is set out within the admin strategy.
Thank you, Joe. Right, if we come back to the recommendations, you will note that apart from noting the report, if there are any further actions that the committee wish to take against employers submitting late or inaccurate payments or data. So if there are no comments or questions on that, we will accept that the report is noted. I can't see any comments, so that is noted, and thank you, Claire, for your report. Right, committee, if we can move to agenda item 9. This is the Border to Coast Responsible Investment Policy, Corporate Governance, Voting Guidelines Review. Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. As in previous years, this paper brings the Border to Coast RI policy and corporate governance voting guidelines documents to the committee for their consideration, and then request the agreement to align the Lincolnshire pension fund documents excuse me, to those of Border to Coast. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because the appendices are quite big, but the review process is set out in paragraphs 4 to 6 on page 88, so you can understand the process that is gone through in updating these annually. The key changes to the RI policy are set out in the table at paragraph 10, and they're minor additions and clarifications with no substantial changes. And similarly, the key changes to the corporate governance and voting guidelines are set out in the table at paragraph 13. And again, these are minor additions and clarifications with no substantial changes. Both documents are very closely aligned to how the Lincolnshire Pension Fund considers it should act as a responsible investor, and there are no contentious issues that have been raised within there. If the committee are content with the changes to the Border to Coast documents and approve the realignment of the funds documents, then officers will make the necessary amendments and republish those documents on our shared website. So I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I have no questions forthcoming at the moment, but we may have to come back to that. So therefore, if we go back to the recommendations, there are 3 recommendations and we will be voting on them, but we will take them all 3 at the same time. So I will read them out and then we will go to a call on the vote through Rachel. So the committee considers the proposed Border to Coast Responsible Investment Policy, corporate governance and voting guidelines. Secondly, agrees to align the Lincolnshire Responsible Investment Policy and voting guidelines to Border to Coast. And finally, to note the report. So I will propose those recommendations. I would like a seconder, please.
Hi, Chairman. Happy to second Councillor Buttroyd.
Thank you, Richard. Rachel, if we can go to the vote, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Strungill.
For.
Councillor Coupland.
For.
Councillor Boutroyd.
4,
Councillor Perrotton-Williams,
4,
Councillor Thompson,
4,
Andy Ancliffe,
4,
Steve Larter,
4,
and Councillor Waller.
4.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Rachel. Agenda item 10. This is the investment strategy update, January 2021. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much. The last time that the committee considered the funding's investment strategy was in January 2020. And this brought to the committee how the investment strategy could be implemented under pooling. The chart at the top of page 118 sets out the fund's target asset allocations split between equity assets, diversifying growth assets and protection assets. And this was agreed as part of the 2019 valuation. Over the last 12 months, good progress has been made in implementing the proposed asset allocations. And the next 3 sections of the report take these and set out where we currently are and what future plans there are for these asset types. So if we look first at section 2, this is equity assets. During 2020, the fund moved out of passive UK equities with Legal & General into the Border to Coast UK listed equity fund. And this fund has a greater focus on ESG characteristics than the completely passive fund with Legal & General, so it better matches the committee's investment and RI beliefs. As Joe has already mentioned, the fund is currently in the process of transitioning out of the Invesco mandate. This is 22.5% of the fund, and it's planned that 15% of this will go into the Legal & General Future World Fund, which is a low carbon ESG tilt, and the committee heard from that manager at the meeting in December. The remaining 7.5% will go into the Global Equity Alpha Subfund, and as Joe has mentioned already, it's anticipated that this will be completed at the end of January, beginning of February. Section 3 covers diversifying growth assets. Again, during 2020, the fund allocated 3.5% of the overall portfolio to multi-asset credit, and this will be increased to 5% when the Border to Coast MAC fund launches later during this year. The fund's diversified alts are currently managed by Morgan Stanley. The plan is that this will transfer over to Border to Coast, but only once they have all the elements of their alternatives programme available. It's not anticipated that this will be ready until later in 2021 at the earliest, and further work will be required with Border to Coast and Morgan Stanley and fund officers to understand how this can be best and most successfully achieved. The transition of property assets to Border to Coast has always been planned to be one of those later areas to be tackled due to its complexity. Work with partner funds and Border to Coast is underway and has been for some time. The committee heard from Border to Coast on this topic most recently at the September training, and further updates will be brought to the committee in the future. The final element of the portfolio is protection assets, and this is covered at section 4. During 2020, the fund transitioned 7.5% into the Border to Coast investment grade credit fund, and the remaining element in passive index linked gilts with BlackRock is planned to remain there for the time being. The final part of the report, section 5, sets out the next steps for the fund. So as you can see, good progress has been made during the last 12 months with asset pooling and with aligning that to our investment strategy. The next steps will focus on working with Border to Coast on the alternatives mandate and the property portfolio. And as further information is available, these will be brought to committee meetings and shared with members in the monthly letter. And I'm very happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Claire. No questions forthcoming that I can see. So committee are asked to note the report unless I see anything To the contrary, we will accept that the report is noted. Thank you, and thank you, Claire. Right, item 11, consideration of exempt information. In accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the following agenda item has not been circulated to the press and public on the grounds that it is considered to contain exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended. Press and public may be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of this item of business. I need to go to the vote on this, so over to you, Rachel.
Sorry, Chairman, do you have a seconder?
I do apologise. You're right. Seconder, please.
I'm happy to second, Chairman.
I'm happy to second.
Wasn't sure who came in first there, but
it was Cleo,
I'm happy
sorry.
to give way.
we shall accept it's Cleo, Richard, but thank you for offering. So proposed by myself and seconded by Cleo. Rachel.
Thank you. If members could state for, against or abstain when I call their name. Councillor Stringill.
For.
Councillor Coupland.
For.
Councillor Bootroyd.
For.
Councillor Perrotton-Williams.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Andy Ancliffe.
For.
Steve Flarter. Councillor Waller. Councillor Waller.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Rachel. Moving on then to